Hello and welcome back to Beernid 40K. I have a confession to make today. I am a fluff junkie. They say the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. Well, there it is. I admit it. And I don't just love the established fluff either. I like to think of holes in the fluff where interesting possibilities lay, of the possible warbands out there in the far future of the 40K universe, and in different timelines and locations in it. Because of this, the personal fluff of my own forces are of pretty big importance. And some people just don't feel that way, so I don't blame you if this episode of the channel doesn't resonate with you. I can't tell you how many competitive Space Marine players I've seen, for example, switching between chapters depending on what's in at the moment. And I know we all want different things from the game, but for me, it's like, how could you? When the same Blue Ultramarines army from 6th edition was suddenly White Scars in 7th because their bike rules were good, and now they're something else again in 8th. For me, I have to love an army in order to invest the time and treasure into making one. But I recognize that in order to win, sometimes the fluff needs to bend on the tabletop. For my Gene Stealer cult, for example, to have 2 Primuses and 3 Patriarchs, it almost seems absurd to claim that I'm a fluff hound, right? I mean, it violates the fluff to have more than one of those, and I'm doing it over and over again. But this is where my brain starts to wiggle, because in these situations, an army suddenly becomes open to my infatuation for creating individualized fluff. For example, my 2 Primuses, they might be twins, right? Twins actually do run in my family. My 2 younger brothers are twins, so it doesn't seem far-fetched for me that a gene-stealing hybrid from the 41st millennium, whose entire biology is geared towards destruction, might be able to, say, adapt to a hostile environment by producing 2 Primus instead of 1. But there's another bit of a problem that my fluff addiction starts to create. You all probably know that the fluff of the Primus is such that they typically start to appear as a greater Tyranid fleet draws nearer. The problem in that for me is that I just don't want my army stuck in a single time period or a single great uprising. My guys are going to end up facing Space Marines, Orcs, Custodes, Necrons, and even Tyranids. And why would my 60 Gene Stealers and 3 Patriarchs not bow down to the hive mind immediately upon its arrival? See, this is how my mind works. Things like that just ruins the story in my head. So I have to fix it. There has to be a workaround, and I can't not figure it out. The story has to be there. And that means in order for my army to be a Tyranid faction that fights against other Tyranids, they need to have some kind of severance or a history that permits that and explains that. And another important thing for me is that it also be reflected in the models as much as possible. So what are some possible things that could make the cult split from the hive, or at least immune to its will, or able to resist? Well, a cult that is devoted to chaos is a possibility. Perhaps a Gene Stealer with limited options infested a severely twisted chaos cultist that was already the property of the ruinous powers. I mean, the hive mind is powerful and all-consuming, but it isn't God. It isn't a God, right? Maybe the Patriarch got a little bit of a cough himself on contact with Patient Zero. Or, as the infestation spread through the Chaos cult, this collective taint overpowered the unified cult, spreading the evil back across the link to the Patriarch. And as his hive mind gradually came to encompass more and more humans, it became more human itself. And therefore, he became corruptible. And the fluff already has a history of Chaos Gene Stealers, so it definitely works. But it still doesn't explain the multiple Patriarchs, does it? If I sit down and I think about why would a Gene Stealer cult have multiple Patriarchs, best explanations for multiple Patriarchs are either 1, you had multiple autonomous cults that have somehow merged into a single one, or 2, the strain of my particular cult has been altered. Option 1 is convenient, but it's almost a too easy way out. I definitely like number 2 better. But then you have to start answering who in the 40K universe would do such a thing. Well, my first instinct is to blame my beloved Alpha Legion, Of course, this too is an easy way out, but damn, it's tasty. I have been preparing an Alpha Legion warband for the future Kill Team release, so that would be a great combination to add their new fluff to my existing cult force. But the problem is, unless I'm playing Unbound, which nobody in my area plays, there isn't a way to legally combine the two as allies. And there isn't really a good way to reflect this history in the modeling of things like neophytes, as far as I know. So my mind then screams, there's another possibility. A rogue Magos Biologus, the Dark Mechanicum, a heretic, who absolutely loves tinkering with and even weaponizing strains of Xenos in 40k. Maybe he doesn't even think he's crossed a line. Maybe he thinks what he's doing is the right thing to do for the Imperium. And those other simpletons from the cult, or the AdMech, safe in their Martian sanctuaries, are fools not to explore this fascinating strain of the Tyranid bioform coarsely referred to as gene stealers by the Imperium of Man. They don't steal genes, he would think. They give genes. Such a sloppy misidentification of a very simply observed procedure would be annoying to one of the brightest biologists in the galaxy, wouldn't it? But the problem here is the Mechanicum can't ally with gene stealer cults either in legal games of 40k, in matched play. But aspects of AdMech can definitely be reflected in the modeling of my army. A few neophytes could easily be modeled or kit-bashed so that they're presented as initiates, for example, that have voluntarily received the biological gifts of the various Tyranid bioforms. Maybe they're vat-grown hybrid experiments, as well as their subsequent offspring. They could all be part of the Magos' greater experiments, for all I know, experiments that surpass the understanding of one as feeble-minded as myself. This grand scheme could go back to the fluff of the logicians even, incorporating them as well. Perhaps this shadowy group funds this madman or madwoman, or maybe that's where the Alpha Legion comes in. I don't need them to be on the tabletop because they're somewhere far away, pulling the strings in some way, or they're working through the Dark Magos I've been talking about. The Dark Magos could even be represented by converting a Primus slightly. Instead of the twin idea, I could just use the Primus rules and model and kitbash the hell out of it, so what the enemy sees as a Primus is actually, to me, my converted Magos. Do you see what I'm getting at here? I hope you've enjoyed this episode. My purpose in making this is to hopefully convince you that, with a little bit of thought, every list can become a personal army with a rich backstory, with a unique motivation for why they're doing what they're doing, why they look the way they look. These are your dudes, and you can give them a story and a narrative, even if your cheesy list defies the Black Library like mine does. Your homework, if you'll accept it, is to tell me a little about your lists and the fluff for them in the comments. For me, I spend way more time thinking about 40k and reading about 40k than playing. I mean, the weekend only happens for a few days a week. The fluff is what got me into 40k. It was a book a friend brought to work in 2005 that made me love 40k. Are you that way too? Or do you have Ultramarines models with White Scars rules? No judgment here if you do, but tell me about it either way. I'm always interested in your thoughts. And who knows? Maybe I'll end up thinking of a reason why your White Scars are dressed up with Ultramarines armor. Or maybe you'll be inspired to do that yourself and tell me about it. So this has been BeerNerd 40k. Give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be talking to you next time.